Hi, good evening and welcome to this webinar on a Wednesday evening. My name is Andrew Ormerod and I'll be both facilitating and presenting this webinar tonight. And so it's a bit of a strange combination because I'm normally the facilitator, not the presenter, but hey ho. We have got a couple of people in the background tonight who are going to assist us with the webinar and also do some tweets and things like that for us. For those people who've never been involved in a webinar before, we can't see or hear you. You can only hear me and you can also only see my screen, at which point I'm going to try and share the app and things. We're going to watch a short video. And we're also going to dial into a couple of people via telephone who's been audited and used CPD to meet the requirements of their governing bodies. CPD portfolio building, the problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to quickly pop your hand up. And so on the screen, you should have an option to ask questions. And you should have an option also on there to pop your hand up. So just pop your hand up for me if you have a CPD portfolio already and it's completely up to date. Just pop your hand up for me. Probably about 20% of people there popping their hand up. Yeah, probably we've got about 500 people on and we've probably got about 20% there who said they have. So I'll tell you the history to how CPD started. Back in 2009, I did some research and I did a survey predominantly from the ambulance service. And they had portfolios very similar to what you can see on screen. And it was organised to some fashion. There was an element of, there were slips or papers in there and newspaper clippings. However, it wasn't very organised, so much so that it would meet the requirement of an audit with the HCPC, for example, or if they were to go for an interview, because there wasn't any structure to it. And so from the 5,000 people I audited, less than 3%, that was about 150 people, were actually ready for an audit and had some organised manner to their portfolio, some organised fashion, so that they could present it if they needed to. If your portfolio does look like that, it is not your fault. It literally is, we're so busy at work within a health and social care setting that we've very, very limited time to sit aside and put it into an organised fashion. And from the research that I found was there was very little people organised, very little time set aside, and people would generally create a portfolio for a reactive purpose, either interview, audit, or the new addition was an incident learning analysis because something had gone wrong in practice. And so what my research suggested, very short in conclusion, was that if we had a very simple system so that people could make regular updates, for example, take less than 2 or 3 minutes to make an update to their portfolio, and then if it came to interview audit, they could pull that together really quickly, it would benefit. And that was the suggestive title of the research after it was written up and the data was gathered. And so what we recognised was using a very structured system would both reduce the time that it would take you thinking about building a CPD portfolio, but more importantly, it will be organised whenever you needed to put that portfolio together for interview, audit, or for incident learning analysis. Also important was an element of keeping evidence safe, because people would go on courses, they would keep certificates and they would take them home, and the wife would then put a cup of coffee on it, or they'd take them home and the kids would start craying on the certificates. And so it's also important to keep evidence of your learning and development in one place where it is neat and tidy. And some people used Evernote, some people used Dropbox in the last sort of 2 or 3 years. But what we recognised was it'd be really keen and tidy if we could keep it all safe in one place. More importantly, having them all accessible in one place would make it very easy and would reduce the stress around registration, re-registration, audit or interview. And also what my research suggested was that employability factor was far greater, increased by people who are more organised in relation to keeping an accurate record of their CPD. What I got from the research was some very simple methodology, and that relates back to this very simple event response outcome. Now, if you don't take anything at all from tonight's webinar, I just need you to think about changing your mindset. And changing your mindset in relation to recording CPD is really important. And when I speak to practitioners, both new within a university setting and those who's ritualised been in practice for 20, 30 years, I cannot emphasise that you have to think differently about how you both take part in learning and development or continuing professional development, but more importantly, how you document it. And so I've used this very simple event response outcome, ERO, yet another acronym that we try to remember. However, If we break it down and we look at E, meaning an event. So the event can be anything from reading a clinical bulletin that's emailed out to you at work. It can be anything from a structured discussion around an ECG that you've taken on a patient and you're not too sure about the findings in relation to the clinical setting. Or it can be anything at all what creates a benchmark learning experience from you. Attending mandatory training, attending a surgical course, attending a course on clinical examination, anything what relates to an event of learning. Second to that is a response. Now, when you learn something, either because you've read it in a book or you've attended a course, the response to that hopefully will be you've gathered and gained some new information, and from that information you can then change or it may influence your practice. Now, that is not always the case, because you might learn something that you've already learned 10 years ago and it simply was just a refresher of underpinning knowledge. However, the response will be, I know this information already, however, I've revisited it, and as such, it is now fresh in my mind, and perhaps with a few changes, because some practice or policy might change around whatever you're doing. However, you've learned nothing new, it's just been a simple refresher, but that would be your response. The outcome is always a change in your behaviour, and the change in your behaviour is, for example, several weeks ago, I went on a surgical airway course, gathered all the information around surgical airways and managing it in an emergency situation. And from that information, my response was, I've now got these new set of skills, and given the situation and scenario of someone having a serious airway compromise that I can't traditionally manage, I could revert to a surgical route. So my outcome was the fact that I've now gathered and gained and been qualified to use this new information to benefit my patients. And as such, if I'm presented with that situation or scenario, I can use a surgical airway. And so event, response, outcome can sometimes also mean risk. And that means risking a new behaviour. And to risk a new behaviour, you'll always get a new outcome, because sometimes we're very stagnant in our risk factor. We don't like taking risks in what we want to learn, and we don't like stepping out of our safety zone. So I always consider that the R, as well as response, can always stand for risk. There's an old saying, if you keep on doing what you've always done, you'll keep on getting what you've always got. And nothing's more right, really. Certainly when you look at building that portfolio, if you don't change the way that you manage that for the future, it will become completely unmanageable. Einstein also defined the definition of insanity as continuing to repeat the same behaviour and expecting a different result. You're simply not going to get it. You have to change the way that you think about your learning and development for the future. And the acronym of event, response, outcome is what I tend to use when I'm teaching new students at the university setting. When all the research was drawn up in November 2009, what I recognised was we needed a very simple recording system. A very simple recording system, because what I found from the people who used the electronic system was that it would take on average of 3 minutes to record a development event. And that will normally, anything what's going to influence a change of practice, so reading a bulletin, having a discussion, it takes roughly around 3 minutes when you record that electronically. And the advantage to recording that electronically is you can update it along with your practice. So for example, I specifically have a piece of reflection that is probably about 10 years old now, and every time I do an investigation or I'm faced across the same element with somebody else who's made the same mistakes as I did 10 years ago, I tend to go into that piece of reflection and I bring it up to date, and I generalize, expand on the discussion to how that's influenced or changed my practice for the future. What I can say is, since 2009, we've been running CPD Me to where we are today, and we constantly analyse the information and also the time it takes to make an entry, and it is still around 3 minutes to record a CPD entry. That's usually less time than it takes to brush your teeth in the bathroom. The other thing about CPD Me, what we recognised was people don't always specifically want to print off paper portfolios. And more importantly, if you're anything like my other half, doesn't specifically want 25 folders in the back bedroom full of every learning and development event that I've taken part in for the last 10, 15 years of my practice. And so the ability to keep it online is the ability to have an electronic PDF. And CPD Me is very unique to any other portfolio builder out there because we allow you to have a digital list of supporting evidence. Now, I'll demonstrate this shortly when I build my portfolio for you as a live demo. But as you can see on the right-hand side there, there's a list of professional development supporting evidence and some blue hyperlinks to the right-hand side. And so the advantage of a digital PDF is if I email this to you or I email it to my governing body or to my employer as an appraisal, they literally will just need to click on those links, and that will highlight the piece of evidence that I've used to substantiate my learning and development with. So I'm not, more importantly, having to send my original certificates, because if anybody's like me and they've been to university and they want a replacement certificate, the last certificate I got from university cost me £50 to replace it. And so what I'd strongly suggest is you turn it into a digital copy, store it somewhere safe, and then you don't have to physically send your original copy anywhere. People normally ask me at this stage, will the HCPC accept my portfolio by email? And they will. I'm just about to dial into a lady who was audited, and she used CPD Me and the process and the portfolio to send it off electronically. And so please bear with me, because I have never dialed into anybody making a phone call before. And so I'm just going to try and get her on the phone for you.
Hello?
Hi, is that Vicky?
Yes, it is. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Vicky, it's Andrew from CPD Me. How are you?
Hiya, fine, thanks.
Vicky, you are live on the webinar tonight, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope the ladies and gentlemen on the webinar can hear you okay. But Vicky, just tell us a little bit about what you used CPD Me for and how you prepared your portfolio before you submitted it, and when you went through the process of submitting to the HCPC.
Okay, a couple of years ago, I got told in the August that I was required to submit my portfolio, and I had till November to submit it. And I submitted it at the end of October, and I submitted it online through the CPD Me.
Okay, how did you actually submit it to them? Did you email it to them, Vicky, or did you send it by?
No, you can send it by post, but there's no point printing it all off to send it. You can just send it electronically by email. It just makes it a lot easier.
And were the HCPC, were they happy to have it by email?
Yeah, they prefer it like that, actually. They did say that they preferred it that way.
Right. And tell us about the experience. What sort of things did you put into your portfolio? How did you sort of structure it?
Well, they said that they wanted a range of things that you did. So you had to make sure that you had a range of experiences. And before that, I hadn't done any CPD or anything like that. So I was caught on the hop a bit, really.
Right.
But obviously, I got membership for the CPD Me, and I was able to. I drew upon I had all the stuff. It was just a case of collating it and putting it in some semblance of order, really. So I put things like supervisions, peer reflections in. I put all my CVs in it that I've done. I've done, like, when I've been for a job interview, I put those kind of things in. If I've done a specific piece of work for work, then I did that and made that into a reflective practice. I think it's just about being creative, really. And where there was gaps of, say, more than, I think they want you to make sure that you put something in at least every 90 days. I don't know if that's changed now.
I think it is still 3 months, yeah.
Was that then? So I think where I hadn't been on a training course or done something, now I was then creative. So I knew that I would have had a supervision, or I was a supervisor then, so I would have supervised somebody. So I made that into a reflective piece of work and put that in as well, because it's anonymous, so nobody'd know any different.
I see. And I think that's a key point you've made there, that if anything is in there in relation to any patients or any service users, that there's no identifiable information. I think that's around Caldecott guidelines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you actually attach any evidence to your diary entries, Vicky, so that they appeared as digital links?
I put loads of stuff in it, yeah, and I still kept all those now. I did that. That was really easy as well. And you can put any certificates of training. You can take a picture of those and scan those in. I got very adept now at using the application as well. If you're on your mobile phone, to do that. So now I've submitted it. Any training that you go on now, you can do it actually there and then while you're on. There's always going to be 10 and 15 minutes in your training course where you can do it while you're even sat there, so that everything's really up to date.
Wonderful. Vicky, I think you've probably sold it for you should come and work for us. You sound like a saleswoman.
Oh, I think it's great. Well, when I was doing mine, there was a few other people in my office, because there's about 150 people, and there was a couple of people from the other disciplines that were also chosen. And then they came over and they couldn't believe how quickly I put it together, because also as well, you draw upon your competencies that you've made, and then it brings it all together. So it puts it all into a really good format. So if you did want to print it off, it's just ready reference of a CV to show to any prospective employers as well.
Vicky, I couldn't have paid you any more money to do that. Thanks very much indeed for your time tonight, Vicky. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Lovely.
Okay,
thanks very much, and speak to you soon. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you've heard, Vicky's lovely, and the reason I know Vicky is she sent us an absolutely lovely email when she got audited and explained that she'd used a process and she was a bit reluctant to use an electronic system. However, what she did do was use CPD Me and met the requirements. Vicky was organised to the element that she had lots and lots of documentation, but what she didn't have was a structure around the CPD. And that's pretty much what I identified from the research back in 2009, that people would have an element of being structured or an element of having lots of documentation, but what they wouldn't have was a structure to represent it if they were called for audit or for interview. Okay, so what we did is we created a simple website and a mobile app, and we allowed a simple dashboard. And the reason we kept it simple is the majority of people who used our research project were roughly around the age of 45 to 65. So people who were well established in professions, but also people who were also at the edge of retirement, who didn't want to be stressed and under the worry of having an electronic system to manage all the portfolio. And also, it wanted to be simple, something simple and easy to use, somewhere where they could capture all their diary entries, somewhere where they could capture all their reflective entries, and then a click of a button and they could print off a complete portfolio when they wanted to. And I'm going to show you how I can create a simple diary entry using the website. And so let's just have a quick show of hands. Is anybody on here members tonight? Just quickly pop your hands up for me so I can see roughly how many members versus non-members we have. So you've got a little option to pop your hand up. Okay, so we've got about 40% members, and that's good. What I will say to you is membership doesn't mean that you're actively using us, and so hopefully at the end of this webinar you will change your practice. So creating a simple CPD diary event. Now if I flick onto the website for you, hopefully that should see now on the screen. So I'm going to talk about a course that I recently went on with Trauma Care, which was an in-hospital 2-day course. So we have 3 simple options here on the website: add to diary, add to reflection, and personal profile. So this very simple element we are going to add to a diary entry. So a diary entry is virtually anything at all that you have created or took part in that creates a learning benchmark, reading a bulletin, mandatory training, having a discussion with colleagues, or anything at all what might influence or change your practice. Now, one of the things I never asked earlier was, are you registered with a governing body? So I'm just going to quickly pop up a poll on your screen. So just quickly tell me if you're registered with the HCPC, with the NMC, or any other governing body, or whether in fact you're not registered with anybody. Just press the button there. So we've got about 75% voted. Okay, 80% voted. I'll close the poll and I'll show you the results. So that the majority of people here tonight are HCPC registered, which is good because I also am. So it means I can continue on my line. So if you are registered with another governing body, you can select that underneath. And the reason we have multiple governing bodies is because we have some dual registered professionals. So some people are registered with the HCPC, but they're also Nursing Midwifery Council as well. These boxes are really simple. And even though it is quite linear, the reason for that is because literally one of the feedback I got from the research was I don't know how to structure a portfolio. And so because I don't know how to structure it, I simply won't start building one. And that was the synopsis really that I got from it. So this simple one is the activity was arranged, and that can be yourself in your own time or as part of your job role. And all that will do is will help build an infographic of how you are managing your learning and development. The next stage is the category this CPD activity relates to. And there's a massive drop-down list there. And so I'm going to put this as a narrated PowerPoint, but there's a lot in that list. In future updates in the next 6 weeks, you're going to be able to add to that list yourself of any specific category. But more importantly, if you are HCPC registered, as you'll see a little bit down the screen, standard 2 is to demonstrate that your CPD is a mixture of learning activities relevant to future or current practice. What the HCPC don't want you to do is attend a course, 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 and end up with 5 certificates. They want some diversity in the fact that you've had some self-directed learning, or indeed some of these other categories that's in there. And so if you're really struggling, just literally pop in there and have a look at what some of the ideas are. The title is as is, and so it's nothing more than a title. So I'm just going to put that as an in-hospital trauma course, and it's a 2-day event. I'll put it as yesterday, even though it was several weeks ago. But what you can do here is you can backdate. So if you have CPD that you've done historically, you can backdate it as far as you like. You can also forward date. And so if you have something planned for the future, so if I have something planned for the 2nd of August, you'll notice now that there's an ability to add this reminder to your calendar. So anything that you forward date has this ability now to intercept either iCal or Android or Google. And the advantage of that is your calendar will then remind you that you need to document your CPD from that specific learning event. So I'm going to go back to today's date. And we're going to put it as today. If the activity is more than 24 hours, so for example, it's a 4-day course or a 5-day course, or even 2-day mandatory training, you can click that second box and you can put an end date in there, and that will just demonstrate to the users that this activity is longer than 24 hours. And so if I actually change that to the 13th, and I put that the end date as the 14th, you'll see that I've demonstrated that it's a 2-day course on the 13th and 14th. This next box, number of hours relating to this activity. Now, the HCPC are not too strict on hours. It's more of an NMC portfolio building exercise. But what I would say is be very conservative in the amount of hours you are documenting. So if you've done a 9 till 5 course, I wouldn't specifically document the full amount of hours between 9 till 5. What I would do is just put in there your structured learning hours. And so I'm just going to put 10 hours in there for the 2 days. An argument I always get asked, or a question I always get asked is, I've been discussing the course over dinner, so can I include that as hours? You can, but I would probably include it in a separate reflection of very casual, non-structured learning, because this is just identified as the learning that took place during that 2-day trauma course. This development activity has benefited me. Once you click on these boxes, you will note that below it drops down a guide, and that guide to this specific diary form is a very simple reflective guide. Why did you select this learning activity? How will it affect you as an individual? Will it change the way you do your job? Will it affect your patients or colleagues or service users? And potentially what could follow on from this CPD learning? Now I think I pretty much should have, let me pop up, I did, yeah, some text, because I've already typed that out, otherwise you'd be sat all night watching me type that out. And so what is it? I put some text in there and explain why I went on the course and also how it's going to benefit my service user. So for my exposure on this course and the information gained, I no doubt will be able to apply better care bundles to my patients that I'm exposed to. The next boxes down are the HCPC standards, and I must emphasise the simplicity of the website does not mean that you do not need to understand the HCPC standards, and so it is really important that you understand standard 1, 2, 3, 4, and standard 5 is collating your portfolio and sending it off for inspection or for the HCPC governance team. The next box down is the knowledge and skill framework. So if anybody works in an NHS setting and you want to cross map this to the KSF, you can do so by mapping this. So if I tick that box, you'll see that the dimensions of the KSF start to appear underneath it. If you want to put a website in here because you've took part in some website learning or an online learning, or indeed you've watched a YouTube video that's going to influence you change your practice, you can copy and paste that website address in here. So for those academics among us, if you, for example, you write an essay and you document, you access this online at such a date and time, it's pretty much the same principle as what you would do here. You can copy and paste the website address in there because you might not necessarily have a physical piece of evidence, but it may be relating to a website where you've learnt your event from. The next box is another quite innovative box, and it only came from the research behind CPD-Me, and that was, do you require a reminder of the expiry date of the certificate? If you click yes, the system will send you an automated reminder in 12 months' time to have a look at that specific entry because it may have expiring evidence. And that's applicable. So, for example, if you have a first aid course or you have an airway course that needs to be renewed in a set period of time, the system will casually tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, Andrew, you need to just have a look at this specific entry because I think it may have a certificate or evidence that might need reviewing. The next box is the ability for you to put in there some evidence. Now, what I will say is at the very top of here is a guide video that you can watch, how to use the CPD diary video. And at the bottom of the form is learning activities and supporting evidence. If you are unsure what you can use for supporting evidence or even to vary your learning activities, I would strongly suggest having a look at them guides and help videos. If you are HCPC, I would strongly suggest going to the healthcare professional's website, because within there is lots of really useful short videos, and hopefully you'll be able to start bringing everything together that I've showed you tonight. So if I click into there, it allows me to capture, if I go into my downloads, the certificate. What I will encourage is you to start using things like PowerPoints, structured discussions, bulletins, anything at all that you've used other than a certificate. I would strongly advise you think about varying your learning and using that to substantiate your portfolio. And I'll show you a reason why when we go further on. You can add more evidence if you want to. You can actually add up to 10 pieces of supporting evidence per diary entry. Once you've done that, you can scroll to the top, make sure that everything's fine and you're happy with everything. And once you've done that, you can click on to submit, and you will get the diary entry has been submitted securely in your portfolio. What you will also now get very quickly is an email confirmation. And that email confirmation will tell you that your portfolio has been received, but more importantly, it's been stored safely. And from that email, you can also edit it, preview it, or delete it if you're required to do so without having to log into the website, which makes it really easy for you. So if we jump into the next section, so the next section of the presentation, creating a reflective entry. Now, if you remember what Vicky said, she submitted a couple of pieces of reflection within her portfolio. And what I can tell you from my experience around supporting people to build an accurate record of their learning and development is the HCPC really do like elements of reflection. And I would strongly suggest if you are audited, you contain nothing less than 2 or 3 pieces of structured reflection within there. Now, I will show you in a second some of the reflective practice and how easy it is to use the website. If people are academics out there and you have done reflections historically within your university or setting, or done an essay, or indeed an incident learning analysis because something's gone wrong at work, then use that reflection and submit it through CPD Me, because I have no doubt, as I said, somewhere in your career you'll be able to bring that back up to date when the incident occurs again, or whether you're supporting somebody else where that incident occurs again. And so if I jump onto the website and show you about reflective practice, again, very simple, second option at the top, click on to add to reflection. Now, I'm not going to fill all these boxes out for you, but what I will say is there's a very simple guide video at the top, how to use reflective diary. Simple again, reflective title, the date of the incident being reflected on. So again, you can backdate this, and so you can go back as far as you like. And then you have 3 models within CPD Me at current. We are looking at another 2 models at the moment, but they're not quite ready yet. We're just trying to seek permission from the authors. But we have Gibbs model, and if you note again, when I hover over or click into the boxes, you will see that underneath description of events, it tells you what you need to include within that structured reflection. Again, for those people familiar with Johns, if you click in the boxes again underneath them, it will tell you how you can put the information there to meet that requirement of the reflective title or the influencing factors title. For those ambulance clinicians among us, whether you're a paramedic, a technician, EMT1, consultant paramedic, we have a CRAShed model. Now, CRAShed was specifically written for pre-hospital practitioners, so anybody who works from a first responder right the way up to consultant paramedic, and this talks about communication, the response, i.e. upon receiving the call, your actions on was the environment, or did it impact the patient positively and negatively? Any subsequent actions when you got to hospital, what was the receiving hospital adequately prepared? An evaluation and ethics, and then a discussion. So pretty much if you think about anything what's gone right or wrong at work, you can break it down into the CRAShed model, and you can document that effectively and then accurately keep a record of your reflective practice. And so we all reflect. Generally, when we weren't as busy as we are today in the modern day ambulance service, we'd sit on an ambulance station and we'd pass ECGs around, or we'd discuss changes in practice. And that is a reflection in its own. It is just a matter of changing your practice from that event to the response, and then the outcome being you must document it at the end of your changing practice. So if I jump back onto the presentation, managing your personal profile. So we've done the diary, we've done the reflection, And now it's about collating and bringing everything together, which is the third stage of portfolio building, which is your personal profile. So I jump back onto the website and I'll show you the personal profile, which again is at the top. Once you click onto your personal profile, this is pretty much where you're able to access all your diary entries, and you do that via access your personal CPD dashboard. You can create a matching front page, so if you're going to print it off because you're going for an interview or audit, or there's also lots of help videos in there. So if I click on to access my personal CPD dashboard, this is where you access all your entries. It's where you can edit all your entries. So if I click onto my diary entry, at the very top of there, you should see the entry that we've made this evening, so the in-hospital trauma course. Now, you can do two things from there. You can view the evidence certificate. So if I click on the little arrow at the side, I can delete that if I want to replace it, or if I just click on it, you can actually see that that's downloaded, and you should now be able to see on screen that that's my copy of the certificate. If you want to preview the PDF copy, so what it would look like in printed format, you can click that and you can see that it's formatted it all in a nice simple page. Now what I would do is, if I was going to print off a portfolio, and this is really good practice, I would download the evidence, or I would use my original certificate. Now you've got to be visual for a little minute. If you think about a A4 folder, if you put your certificate on the right-hand side of that folder, and then you put your diary entry on the left-hand side, imagine if you went to an interview or an audit or an incident learning analysis, whoever was reading that CPD portfolio could read your diary entry, so they'd understand the reason you took part in that learning. But more importantly, at the right-hand side would be your substantiating evidence. And so left-hand side, diary entry, right-hand side, substantiating evidence. And as you would go through, it would almost be like a storybook of your learning and development. So to preview it, you click on the preview. To edit it, you click on the edit, and that will pop up in another window, and then you can make some amendments. You can change that to however you seem necessary. Click back onto the diary entry, and I'll show you how to delete it. Now, if you delete an entry, it will pop up and say that this is irreversible. We will actually store the information for 7 days after you have confirmed deletion. After that, you will not be able to recover that entry. So if you've uploaded a long piece of reflection, or you've uploaded a long piece of evidence, after 7 days, if you haven't contacted us, it will be deleted. And that is based upon some research we did around people making accidental deletions. As you do, sometimes people sit down at night, they've had a long shift, they'll have a glass of wine, they'll sit and they'll start editing the portfolio, and before they've known it, they've deleted 2 really primary entries. And so if you contact us very quickly, we will be able to recover them for you. But if I click on delete, you will see that that will now completely delete that entry, and it will disappear from my standards. These 5 boxes also give you a little bit of synopsis, but I'm not going to go into them too much because they are going to change shortly, because I have a new system about to launch. And so that is my dashboard, and that is where I manage all my learning and development. Really simple, and the reason why I've kept it really simple is because that's what people wanted it. So for those people out there who are mobile app or use mobile app devices, I'm now going to again attempt a feat of technology and try and stream to my screen. So you should be able to see my screen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how quickly I can make a CPD entry using the app. I'm going to click onto the CPD Me app. I've already registered the app, and I've used the same email address as the website, and I'm going to go to the bottom where it says submit to diary, and I'm going to submit a diary entry. I'm going to click on activity arranged, and again I have the drop down list, so this is going to be myself in my own time away from work. A brief description, so I'm going to put in there reading, emergency, medicine, handbook. The start date is today. Next. So my HCPC standards, and again, reiterating, don't just tick them because it's easy to tick them. You must understand the standards. Click on to next. This development activity has benefited me because, and this is where making a quick entry really does make a difference. And again, reversing back to the conversation with Vicky, what she said was, I make entries now as the learning and development takes place. And that is an absolute important change in your practice, because if you download the app, you're no longer waiting 4 or 5 days after the event to make a record of your learning and development. You can make it virtually the same time as you're learning. So If I go to the bottom of my screen on the app, you'll see there's a little microphone, and in there, if I click it, I should be able to dictate. So, today I have read the Oxford Handbook of Emergency Medicine. I specifically looked at a book around bladder, urethral and testicular trauma, and I will use this in the context of clinical decision making the next time I come across a patient who has problems with their bladder. Full stop. So, it is reasonably accurate depending on how quiet you are. You can go in and you can change, so blabber, I can change that back to bladder. Sometimes I do blabber. Click on to next. This category this activity relates to, so this is going to be reading. So I can click down to reading or reviewing. On my evidence, I can, if I like, capture it. So if I put on my camera, you'll be able to see that I would find the relevant page within this book, and I would capture that, and I would use that as supporting evidence. So use photo. And then what I can do is, if there's a website involved, I can input that, and I can quickly submit. Now, once I've submitted it, again, you get the little pop-up on your screen, and then within your previous submission menu, you should be able to see at the very top will be Reading Emergency Medicine Handbook, and if I click onto that, you will see that it very quickly has put it into the format for me. And if I close down the app and I go back onto the website and I refresh this page, you will see at the top of my diary entries now should appear the reading book with emergency medicine. If I click on the evidence, you can see that the evidence is immediately attached there. And if I want to, again, I can click onto edit or delete that specific entry. Let's talk a little bit about the video library. The video library is important because there's lots of things in there that is going to support you. Lots of things like how to document attending a conference, how to document in-service training, how to document and reflect upon your learning experience. And there's also lots of videos in there about how to vary the amount of evidence or vary different types of evidence that you can use to support yourself. And so I would strongly advise that you have a quick look at those because it really will help you. And we've tried to keep the videos down to around 1 minute to make it so that's easy to access. Getting stuck. The reason we are here behind CPD-Me and the reason that makes us different to any other portfolio builder out there is we are a group of health and social care professionals. And so if you have any questions, we probably are best placed to answer them. We're not an IT company. We are literally all still full-time working health and social care professionals. And so if you get stuck or you need any help, you just simply request the live chat, or you can request a support ticket, and we will guaranteedly answer you within 24 hours because we have staff who work around the clock because we all work shifts within a NHS or private organisations or social care. And so you'll always get support from a team of health and social care professionals. And what makes us different to any other CPD recorder out there, because there is lots, and I won't specifically say that we are the best, however, I would be a little biased if I didn't. We have a research team at 2 universities who use us constantly for their year 1, year 2, year 3 and year 4 students. And then when they get to year 3 and year 4, they become involved in a research project around documenting CPD. And at that point, they use the current CPD system and they reflect upon their learning and how it's collated their evidence, and they give us constructive feedback to what we need to change to make it fit for their future practice. And so we're not just an IT company with a group of health professionals. We have a research team that are constantly looking at ways to make it easier and simpler for you guys for the future. The world has changed in relation to CPD, and the demand for highly organised professionals is far and highly sought of by employers. More importantly, what I do know for people applying for paramedic practice places within a university setting, they want to see that people are really organised and that they are proactive around their learning and development. So that leads me to the question and answer session. Now we appear to have lost Sarah. I don't know where she's gone. She normally does the questions and answers. But if you have got any questions, I'm more than happy to open up your microphone. So if you pop your hand up, I will open up your microphone and I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you. Or if you want to type your question in below, I'll be more than happy to answer the question for you. And so I have got a question from Brian. Brian says, how do you show university courses? Is it worth putting each module in individually? How do you represent the hours? For instance, I have done over 130 hours of placement over a 4-month period. So, in short, Brian, I'll split into 2. I would definitely, if you have done a Bachelor of Science degree in paramedic practice, for example, I would break it up into the individual modules. because otherwise you've got one single piece of evidence that has been put onto the system and nothing else upon it. Whereas if you think about that course as an umbrella, each point of that umbrella will be a separate module that you have included or that you've attained to include within your portfolio. So do try and break it down. Do try and include as much evidence. And so if you've done some research or some reading, then I would definitely strongly suggest that you use that PDF or use that research or development to support your portfolio. And you can do that very easily by breaking it down again into separate modules. In relation to your hours, I'd probably again split it down over the modules. It is very difficult, Brian, as I said, because if you've spent 3 years at university, the amount of hours that you're going to accrued over that period of time is going to be almost unmanageable, and you'd probably find it very difficult to manage the amount of hours that you're going to potentially document. What I would definitely say to you is just document how many hours you've spent on each module. So for example, if you've done a module over 4 or 5 weeks, then I probably would just break that down into simple 4 or 5 weeks and document that within the text. I wouldn't specifically try to calculate the hours, otherwise you'll probably run out of time. Hopefully that answers your question. We have got another question from Io. Okay, so how do I merge the information logged in my clinical skills app, which I saw you have on your phone, with my CPD Me portfolio? Good question, Io. We are just working on it at the moment. We are looking at the security certificate between the two pieces of technology, and hopefully once we've conquered that, we will indeed allow you at the end of your portfolio building to build a complete portfolio of your learning and development. I will show you in a second how quickly I can build my portfolio. I did miss that bit out, but I will show you in a second how I can put my information together and build my portfolio. We have got another question from Stuart. How much information do the HCPC require? Again, Stuart, there's no black and white, and what they will tell you if you contact the support team at the HCPC is they require your last 2 years worth of learning and development. And so the advantage of having a system similar to CPD.me is you can continue to backdate it as long as you like, and if there is things like reflection, you can bring them back up to date. They do say that they like at least 5 or 6 elements of reflection within there. So 5 things that's change your practice, or at least 2 or 3 very structured learning and development reflections. So either using Gibbs or John's model, or if you're not academic, you can break it down into simple terms of what have you learned, why have you learned it, and how is it going to influence the change your service use, as well as going to influence your practice. And so you don't specifically have to be academic to follow them. And again, if you revert back to the website, if I jump back onto the website for you, you'll notice that it is quite simple, and you literally just follow the boxes down. So throughout the reflective practice, you would literally just click down and follow the guide that goes into each one of them. Specifically, if you're not particularly academic, this breakdown of communication, response, actions will help most practitioners break that information down to form a piece of reflection. You also have to remember that each one of your diary entries is an element of reflection. So within all of these, there is some reflection within there. So if you are struggling to get started, or you think, I'm not too sure what to include, I would probably strongly suggest you pick about 4 or 5 of your diary entries and perhaps emphasize on those or build more upon them, and you'll probably find very quickly you'll have your 1,500 words that's required by the HCPC to meet their requirement. I hope that answers your question, Stuart. Dave, I'm still currently serving in the military and they do not recognise my paramedic qualification. Can I put my clinical skills and sessions in the military in this portfolio to help my development? Yes, you can, Dave. We are just currently working with a couple of military bodies at the moment to look at turning paramedics in the military into civilian paramedics and also cross-mapping some of your skills. And so I would strongly suggest, even if you're not HCPC registered at the moment, that you start to build around those standards, because at some stage in the future, you may well be HCPC registered. So having a good understanding of them is definitely going to benefit you in the long run, no question of a doubt. We have a question from Teresa. Do you think it would be relevant to use CPD.me to start collecting evidence before starting university for paramedic science? Absolutely, Teresa. We have probably thousands of first responders who use that as a stepping stone to get onto a paramedic course or degree. And what I do suggest they do is start collating things. One guy this week asked me if he'd done some bar work He was working in a bar, so not related at all to any patient values, but he was building up on his customer service. He was building up on his experience of dealing with members of the public, dealing with people in adverse incidents, dealing with people who were upset or emotional. And so what I showed him, or what I taught him to do, was emphasize upon them very basic communication skills, and also how we would apply them in an emergency situation. So definitely start collating evidence. What I will tell you is, on the next update to the system, is you will be able to capture a piece of evidence and tag it with a few words and save it for a future learning and development event, which the system will allow you. It's almost like a CPD me Dropbox for keeping your learning and development, and then you can attach that to diary entries at a stage in the future. But absolutely start collecting as much evidence as you can. Again, and if you have got the app, then simply just capture bulletins at work if they allow you to do so, and use them to support your CPD, because they are really, really, really imperative to a change in your practice. Ian has asked, some events are similar to previous ones. Can we copy a previous diary event entry or reflection and then edit the copy? You can, Ian, but don't ensure that they do differ. The theme will probably sometimes be the same, and so miscounting of a drug being a very typical example, but do try and vary the element of what you're documenting. It is cheating a little bit, but what I do say is that a piece of reflection can develop with you throughout your career. And so as long as you're editing it and it's reasonably edited to a standard that you're not just changing the first word or the first two words, you must ensure that it does vary from each submission. But yeah, you're quite right. You can copy some entries, and then you can emphasize or reflect upon how that differs from perhaps an earlier entry. So what you could do is discuss that actually last year you documented something very similar, but this year, based on your reflective learning or your intuitive decision making, you have changed your practice, and this was the outcome of that learning event. And so if you work, what I always say, Ian, and there's no pun intended, is work smart, not hard. We have got another question from Laura. Following from the last point, is it worth inputting every hospital-based placement too? Yeah, what I would do is document, or you could do a very brief reflection, Laura. So you could document at the end of your reflective visit, whether that's a day or whether it's a week, what you've learned from that, and you can break it down into bullet points, because at a later stage you can then emphasize upon them bullet points. So you don't specifically have to bulk it out. You don't have to write the full reflection there and then. That really would be quite negative of me to even suggest that you did that, because in actual fact we know that you're not going to do that. Just make simple bullet points which you can then emphasize or reflect upon at a later date. But yes, in answer in short, is definitely input your hospital-based placements, because they are absolutely a benchmark in your learning and development for the future. Matt has put, how much info should we put on the cover sheet for the HCPC, and how would you recommend doing this? Again, what they do want, Matt, is, and I'll quickly jump onto my portfolio, and I'll show you how I can build a portfolio. So imagine if I got audited this week, I'll show you how I would build my HCPC portfolio. So, print my portfolio. The title I would put in there, Learning and Development Portfolio. You've noticed at the end there's a -6 character there, and the reason for that is it will start to fall off the end of the page. So what I might just put on there is Learning Portfolio, and then I'll put on there HCPC Audit, and I might put the audit number on there, Matt. So if I have a specific audit number, I can put that on there. So we'll just make one up for the time being. Click on to continue, and now you have the ability to select the date range. And so I'm not going to select the last 2 years in here, but if I do, you'll be sat here all night watching the screen load up. So I'm just going to select in there from the 1st of June to the 14th of June. Now, the advantage of having all your entries in there is if this wasn't an audit, and it was, for example, an interview or an incident learning analysis, you can cherry pick from all your entries. So I'm just going to pick them few dates from the 1st to the 14th. But you'll see that you now have the ability to include. So you tick these boxes and include them to entries. You also have the ability to attach the digital list of supporting evidence. So again, reverting back to what Vicky said, you literally can send your supporting evidence, so you don't have to physically send to the HCPC your actual certificates. They'll be able to click on the hyperlink and view them specific entries. If you want to preview them, you can click on the preview and you can look at them. Click on to next, and that will capture then, I'll just delete them, but that will capture any potential reflective practices that you've submitted between them 2 dates. Click on to next, and then very quickly you can click on to download to download your complete portfolio. And what that will do, it will pull all the information from both your diary entry that you've selected, your reflective entries, and also from your personal profile. So if I scroll down here now, you can see that it's pulled all my information, my personal information, my summary of work experience, my job description, my personal statement, and then my learning and development entries. So you can see there that I've got learning and development entries between the 7th of June and the 14th of June, followed by my learning and development entry, followed by my evidence, followed by my second learning and development entry, followed by another piece of evidence, followed by the digital list of supporting evidence. So if they wanted to see those, if that was a certificate, they would literally click on the links and that would download to their computer so that they can have a look at substantiating that evidence. And then at the very bottom, I have my summary of HCPC standards, because when you're ticking those boxes, like we said, Matt, those boxes are what fills or calculates this summary of HCPC standards. So you can see there that how I've mapped the standards to those two particular diary entries. And then how I've met the HCPC standards. So basically what I've done there is I've took 2 or 3 diary entries and I've emphasised and built upon them 2 examples within my portfolio. And at the very bottom, I have a CPD declaration or a portfolio declaration. So I'm going to print that off. I can sign that and send it off to the HCPC. To say that that is my own work. What I will tell you again is it takes on average of about 39 hours to build a portfolio. You saw how quickly I managed to do that then. And so that again is another advantage to using the website, because again, the reason the website was created was because I need to keep a record of my CPD, so I need to make it easy for myself. We have a question from Graham. Any tips for a student paramedic using CPD-Me? Absolutely, Graham. I was one of the first student paramedics in the country to be born and bred from a university background, and it was during that time that I recognised that I was going to have massive problems recording all my learning and development. And so I'll give a little plug to UCLan, the University of Central Lancashire. They were the people who gave birth to me, and it was at that point in my 3rd year that I recognised that actually we're going to have a problem here, because by the time I get to 20 years in my career, we're going to be full. My back bedroom's going to be full of folders. As a student paramedic, what I would definitely recommend, Graham, is you start to keep records of all your modules, any learning that you do. So when you document or you download a journal and you read something in that journal that you think might influence or change your practice, and it might be something as a new student paramedic, Graham, that might be the basics around effective communication, or it might well be dealing with death or breaking bad news, but document what you've learned from that particular diary entry, or what you've learned from that particular reading experience, and how that might influence a change of practice. And the reason I tell you that as a student, Graham, is because in 5 years' time, when no doubt you will have qualified as a paramedic, you may have a student with you who has that same issue, or is unable to articulate themselves very well when they're breaking bad news, or is not able to have a discussion when they're confronted with aggressive patients. So at that point, you may be able to say to him, "Hi, Simon. Back in 2017, I actually submitted, while I was a student, a piece of evidence that I found upon breaking bad news or dealing with aggressive patients. Do you mind if I share that with you? Perhaps you can learn from that just like I did 5 years ago." And so my greatest tip for you, Graham, is document as much as you think you might need for the future, including all the modules that you are doing at the university, your PowerPoints, your presentations, your problem-based learnings, and your reflective practice. And again, as I said earlier to Ian, work smart, not hard. Harris has asked, do you have any system to monitor the attended hours of an activity, say one journal club or symposium? If yes, is there any way to connect directly to CPD-Me? It is very difficult with monitoring the attended hours, and so the problem is, Harris, the hours have to be structured learning or unstructured. And so over lunch, over an hour, we could have a 20-30 minute unstructured discussion, whereas sat in a classroom, it could be very structured for 2 or 3 hours. And so it is very difficult to document that. I'm not too sure what you mean by is there any way to directly connect to this to CPD-Me. There is, within all the diary forms, the ability for you to document hours. And if you have to explain the hours, i.e. structured as in a classroom or non-structured as a discussion, then I would definitely suggest that you document that. It would be definitely good for you to document that. I hope I've answered your question, Harris. If I haven't, send me another one through and I'll must try harder. Thomas has asked, will it be possible for CPD to use the link for employers to access online portfolio? We already have that, Thomas. That we have about 120 organisations who currently use us for that reason, and they support their employers by providing CPD to them at no cost, but they have access to their learning and development. And that's not to spy on you, Thomas. That's not to discipline you. It's allowed them to support you in your learning and development journey. And what I can tell you is from all the companies and organisations who use us, I don't know of any of them, because I stipulate this at the very start of the contract, that would ever use the recording of CPD or reflection, which I must add is very personal to you, against you as a clinician. So yes, there is a possibility for you to for employees to have links to it, but it normally is through our cloud system. It's not specifically through CPD. But if you want to know more information about that, Thomas, I'll be more than happy to if you drop me a quick email afterwards and we can discuss that. Janet has said, I work in clinical education, so I am learning, discussing, etc. every day. How do I log that? You don't always have to be full-on clinical, Janet. We have got roughly about 5,000 users who have not seen a patient in 12 months, and generally it's a question I get asked all the time. How do I turn that into a diary entry to either substantiate or meet the requirements of the NMC or the HCPC? Literally just emphasize on what you have prepared for your learning journey and also how you have delivered that to the students, but then put your mindset into that of the student. So, for example, if I teach, going back to that surgical airway, if I teach those skills to my student paramedics or my advanced paramedics or consultant paramedics, and they go away and utilize that skill and save somebody's life, it's almost a secondary development, isn't it? Because you've taught them the skills and the knowledge and the underpinning knowledge to advocate and take that skill away, and then they're going to apply that in practice. And so literally break the journey down. Again, event, response, outcome. Your event would be preparation for practice or preparation for lecturing or teaching. Your response will be, I'm going to give this information to these students and they're hopefully going to change their practice or be empowered to take that away with them and change their practice for the future, which in turn will benefit the service user or indeed the patients. And so just literally break it down. And it may help if you just break it down into simple bullet points, Janet, and then just emphasize upon that. As in relation to your substantiating evidence, you've got the PowerPoint there probably, as well as any learning material, then simply just use that to substantiate your evidence. And so if the CPC audited you and they wanted to see what you've been teaching, they could not only see your PowerPoint and perhaps your notes, like you've probably seen mine pop up tonight on the screen, but they can also see the information there where you've got that PowerPoint from. So whether it's the Paramedic Practice Journal or whether it's you being on Blackwell Synergy, they can see where you've brought that PowerPoint together from. I hope that answers your question, Janet. Craig has asked what different type of memberships are there and the cost. Good question, Craig. It's not about money for CPD because we are a non-profit organisation. CPD virtually makes no money at all for memberships. It is £15.99 per 12 months. Sometimes we do have offers where you get half price, and so please do watch out for those. So we charge £15.99 for 12 months, and for that you also get every single month, if I quickly log back onto the website for you, a learning and development webinar. So every single month we have a free webinar. You can see mine is there in June, and for all those people who have attended tonight and who are members of CPD you will get a certificate and a copy of this video recording, which is emailed out to you, but will also drop automatically into your CPD portfolio, Craig. And that's not a capture point. It's not a selling point to increase memberships. It literally is because I recognise that it's very hard sometimes to keep a management of all those diary entries, all those pieces of evidence, all those dates. So what we do by sending them automatically to you is drop them into your portfolio, and then we expect you to emphasize or develop and document what you learned from tonight's webinar. So hopefully you would say, I've got a better understanding around constructing a portfolio, and as such, I've got a certificate of attendance for the webinar, which is nothing other than a certificate of attendance, but I've also got a copy of the recording, which I can review and revisit if I need to do so in the future. Good point to probably go through these at that same time. We have got some webinars coming up there. We've got one in June from Richard Lee from Welsh Ambulance Service on measuring what matters and reducing demand. Then we've got one for July on interaction in groups, how to get the best out of people. So anybody in a seniority or a supervising role will definitely benefit from that, and that's from Dr. Mike Davis. And again, e-learning. And then we've got a really popular one in September coming up from one of our consultant paramedics, Dan Smith. What I will tell you is that is filling up really quickly. There literally is only 500 places on there, and I think we've already filled about 200 of them. So I would definitely recommend you jumping on that webinar and getting booked onto it. And of course, it's free of charge. And then we've got Becky from Boo Coaching and Consulting in September, who's talking about leading with a coaching style. And so again, I've been on some courses when I did my CMI, and Becky was one of the teachers and supported lecturers there. And so I would definitely suggest that you jump onto some of them webinars. And so again, very simple. The benefit is you get to manage your CPD, Craig. You get a team of health and social care professionals you can tap into whenever you need to. It is super, super secure. If you look at the top left-hand corner where I'm just popping the website, we are one of very few online CPD portfolio builders who are 120% strict about the security of your information. And we've got data policies upon practice, and we are ensuring at all point in time that we will look after your data. And again, that's where some of the costs get spent on, ensuring that that we keep your information safe, because I'm sure you pretty much don't want us to lose it. What I will tell you, in all the time that I have been involved in CPD from the very start, we have never, ever, ever lost a piece of information from any of the applicants or any of the members. And that was based upon some research that I did right at the very beginning, when we had other portfolio builders out there that would sometimes lose information. Hope that's answered your question, Craig. Sorry, it's waffled on a little bit. Matt. So Matt thinks, thanks. I think this is parts that I needed help with. Yeah, if you need any help, Matt, send us an email. We'll be more than happy to support you. At the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, as you can see, there's a support button. Click that support button, and you can ask us a question, and somebody will answer it anytime. Laura said, I agree with Graham. I wish I'd started doing this at the beginning. I'm qualified now, so I have so much I could have recorded. Again, Laura, it is just about changing your practice. Event, response, outcome. I really, honestly, guys, cannot emphasize that enough to you. I deal with so many emails, in fact, nearly 2,000 emails in the last 2 weeks, where people have said, I've been really good in practice, I've done lots of learning, I just have not kept a record of what I've done. And so download the app, guys. Just make very brief and quick records of what you've done, capture some evidence, because if you do get picked for audit, it is not as stressful as you think it is. The HCPC are not there to strike you off. They are there to support you in any way they can. Even though their requirements, or one of the standards, is that you keep an accurate record of your CPD, they probably are aware that there will be people out there, just like some people who are on this webinar tonight, who have not done that. They have all the information, they have the certificates and read the bulletins, but they just do not have that in a structured format. And so hopefully if you do use CPD, it will just help you break that down and keep it a little bit more organised. I am going to try and wrap these questions up quite quickly, so I'm aware I've gone over the hour. Lynette says, I'm a team leader and we have weekly meetings with other team leads to discuss staffing and other service issues. Is it worth logging this in my diary as evidence for the minutes? Absolutely, Lynette. I can't emphasise that enough, again, because it is about keeping an accurate record of your learning and development, and anything what you've done to support or promote your staff or your team in their practice. And so absolutely, definitely, make sure you do. You also ask what the basic level entitles you to. The basic level does actually cap you to the amount of entries you can submit. I think it caps you to 5 diary entries and 2 reflections, and so that's the element of the basic. And what we hope from the basic is that you can have a feel around the website and that you understand how the system works. And then if you decide to, you can join us as a premium member and get access to all the other benefits and features. We have got a new app coming very shortly. And that new app will know whether you are a basic member and you are a premium member, and it will also give you learning and development guides and videos that are strictly only available to premium members, because we're having to pay loyalties to them, and so that's another tangible benefit. When do the HCPC start calling for people's portfolios? If you are a paramedic or I think physiotherapist, Stuart, now I do know 45 people who have been picked for audit, because most of them have contacted me in the last couple of weeks and said, I've been picked for audit. Do you think they'll accept the portfolio in electronic format? And as you heard from Vicky tonight, again, she's been very useful, hasn't she, Vicky, tonight? They will accept it by email, and you also get an email back from them, like a read receipt, to say, well, yeah, thank you very much for submitting it electronically. What I will say to you guys is, even if you submit that portfolio and it doesn't meet the required standards, they give you time to correct it. They're not going to strike you off. They will give you time, and they'll give you some feedback on how you can build upon that learning experience and build upon that portfolio. And so please don't feel disappointed if it does get sent back to you and they tell you that it doesn't meet the requirement. It's also nothing to be embarrassed about. We're all professionals. We're all in professional practice. We all should be able to receive constructive feedback. And so just see it as some constructive feedback and then make the appropriate and requested changes and then resubmit it. It's as simple as. IO, how can I best evidence peer group learning, e.g. sitting in the ambulance discussion, a challenging job? Again, as I did, IO, just briefly dictating to it. Don't include any patient identifiable information. That's the only tip I can give you. But literally just keep it very structured but very simple. So had discussion with my mentor Brian in relation to this last patient. The patient presented with abdominal pain, which she had had for 5 weeks, but insisted on ringing an ambulance each time this was to flare up as opposed to ringing the GP. Keep it really simple, but just keep it an accurate record and how you then would go on to use that as a learning and development. So whether you'd report them to the frequent flyer team or whether you would indeed have a discussion with the GP and look at putting some kind of care package in place, there must be a learning element. So again, event, response, outcome. There has to be a response to the reason you're creating that learning event. Hope that answers your question. Last one from Michelle. Michelle says, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the webinar tonight. Thank you, Michelle. I'm glad you have. I have kept a record of my CPD in paper format. Can I turn this into electronic? Yes, you can, really easily. What I would definitely suggest you do is download the app and literally just put in there the date of the learning event, capture the evidence and the title, and then you can go back into the dashboard online like I showed you at Lynette, and you can emphasize upon that learning experience. Don't backdate it too far back because, again, if you are HCPC registered, you're probably not going to need anything any longer than sort of 2 years back. But for interview or for incident learning analysis, I would definitely suggest that you include everything you've done for the last 2 years. I just want to ask you one more question, guys, and it's only again for our research. Quick poll on the screen. How often do you honestly update your record of CPD or learning and development? Now, honestly tell me before you watch this webinar whether you do it as it happens, every week, every month, ad hoc when you have time to, or 100% to be honest and say, I never record my CPD. I've got some pretty true accurate figures there, so I'll go back 70%, 80% voted. Interesting. Okay, I'll close the poll and I shall show you the results, guys. Well, the majority, as you can see, ad hoc when I have time, 48. We know we are busy practitioners, ladies and gentlemen. We all know we are uber busy out there. We're uber busy whether you work in primary care, emergency care, secondary care. Hopefully, from tonight's webinar, you will have all the information you need and you will have some tools that I've given you to go away and make an accurate record of your learning development. If you have got any questions at all, please drop me an email to andrew.ormerod@cpdme.com or fire us a support ticket. You will get a quick survey which pops up after the webinar tonight. But all I can say is thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you for my team who's been behind me, who's been doing some tweeting. Hopefully, if you have been audited, again, tech from me, do not worry. Submit your evidence to the HCPC. If you do not pass first time, take it as constructive feedback and develop upon that learning experience. All that leaves me to say is thanks for joining us tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and have a safe journey. If you are continuing to work or you are at work, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.